Who are the top 3 players on every roster in the NFL? Which players might not be there by the end of the year, and what players could join them and be newcomers on the list on today's Peacock and Williamson?
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to Peacock and Williamson. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate all you everydayers out there. If you're not an everydayer, make sure you are subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Okay, we're talking star power today on today's episode, Matt. And PFF has their list of top 3 players on every single roster. I want to sort of dissect these top 3s. If we agree with the top 3s, and I think we learn a lot about teams by how many stars they have. How hard is it to whittle it down to 3, or how hard is it to just find a third player you want to put on the list, and how these lists could change after the upcoming season.
Yeah, and the way I see it is, I'm not here to say, PFF, you screwed up. You should have this left guard on instead of this third guy. I just think it's interesting of maybe from the perspective of who would you really like to see on here next year? Or, boy, I hope we can do better than that guy as our top player a year from now, or, things like that. And what's funny is this is an alphabetical list, and based off yesterday's show, the team that comes up first alphabetically, we think might come up first in the draft too, the Cardinals.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's one of the teams where it's a little bit difficult to find that star power with their 3 players. I think the first 2 are pretty easy, and it's Kyler Murray and it's Budda Baker. One guy on offense, one guy on defense. And really Budda Baker, I think this is important for them to re-sign him. And he's a foundational leader. He is I think even more so than Murray, even though Murray's the quarterback. Because of personality and because Murray's hurt to start the year, Budda Baker is the most important person on that Arizona Cardinals roster right now.
Yeah, and this is even more disheartening, though, is the top 2 guys listed. One has hinted or flat out said, I want traded, and the other one might not play half the year, all the year. Who knows? This team's pretty rough.
Could be gone. They haven't re-signed Budda Baker yet either. And Marquise Brown is on the last year of his deal, and he's the 3rd player on their top 3.
Which I can't argue with, but you would wish your 3rd player was better than Marquise Brown. I hope for their sake, Paris Johnson's a no-brainer top 3 guy next year. You know what I mean? And so is the free agent equivalent of Javon Hargrave. Some stud they signed because they have money, and the first-round pick this year was really good. They'd be like, okay, this isn't a bad list now.
Yeah. What if next year all 3 of those names aren't on the list? And
they might not be.
It's Paris Johnson, Caleb Williams, and some free agent
or whatever, right? And Kyler Murray's in Tampa, like we mentioned yesterday,
or DJ Humphries, who's the also considered here. And looking around their roster, no DeAndre Hopkins anymore. JJ Watt retired. It's getting a little bit harder to find star players for the Arizona Cardinals, which is why we are projecting them to have the top pick in the draft next year.
Yeah, and those recently drafted first-round linebackers don't look like they're ready to grab this either. It's not pretty. This is probably the worst one.
Yeah, Zaven Collins, could he be on the list next year?
Oh,
I hope that somebody takes
a leap of faith.
Right. The Atlanta Falcons, Chris Lindstrom, Jake Matthews, and Kyle Pitts, all fairly large human beings there. A couple of offensive linemen, and they're tight end they drafted number 4 overall a couple of years ago. I think there might be some arguments here, and maybe even rookie Bijan Robinson should be in consideration here. And I would definitely put AJ Terrell on this list, maybe over all of them.
Yeah, and I'm glad they mentioned Lindstrom, who's no one knows it, but he's one of the best guards in the league. But I think next year you might be like London, Bijan, Terrell, so there are some promising things happening here. I bet Jake Matthews isn't on the list, not because he's bad and falls off a cliff. It's just I bet somebody's better.
I would still put AJ Terrell on this list, and probably Kyle Pitts has to go because he just hasn't quite done what we need him to do yet to be considered a superstar player, even though he's got superstar talent.
Yeah, I'm still a big believer. Some of the metrics really show that he had the least opportunities to succeed out of tight ends, and he had 1,000 yards in his rookie year. But who knows? He absolutely could not be on this list next year. That wouldn't shock me.
Yeah. So even if you're not considering rookies, and it could be a big rookie class for the Falcons, starting with Bijan Robinson, he's not on the list. They had last year's top pick, Drake London, who didn't make the top 3, who could absolutely be there. Big free agent signing in Jesse Bates. Elder statesman Grady Jarrett. There's a lot of names here, and so this roster, maybe the Falcons, maybe I haven't given the Falcons enough credit. Kind of thinking of it through this lens. A lot depends on Desmond Ridder. I mean, you're doing backflips if Desmond Ridder's on this list next year, right? There's one of the top 3 guys. So it's a big year for the Atlanta Falcons.
I mean, think about a year ago, they had just traded Matt Ryan to Indianapolis. Their top 3 kind of looked like Arizona's top 3. And now they've got a lot of candidates to be cornerstone players.
Baltimore Ravens, no surprise at all that Lamar Jackson tops their list of the 3 stars on this team in Baltimore. Then it's tight end Mark Andrews and cornerback Marlon Humphrey.
Yeah, and also considered Roquan Smith, I would have put over Humphrey. I thought he was a more impactful player this year. And again, I'm not here to kill PFF. They would love for a Bateman or maybe even Linderbaum or somebody like that. One of these younger guys. They haven't drafted great lately.
Odell. What if Odell balls out?
Odell?
They got to try to re-sign him again.
Yeah. So they have some candidates, or Hamilton, the safety, takes a big step and is a star in his second year. That would go a long way.
One of those young defensive linemen that they have.
If it was Ojabo or Owe, they would be doing cartwheels. Yeah. That's what
Ronnie Stanley's obviously been around for a long time. He's had some, recent injury problems, but he would have been the guy on this list for so long, and could still be that guy this year.
He's a pivotal guy for them. I mean, it's such an unfortunate situation because the week that he signed this contract, they actually played the Steelers, blew out his ankle that week. I mean, like days later, and really has not been the same. And you can't get out of the contract. I mean, that's a really pivotal situation for them.
Buffalo Bills are next up here, and obviously some big-time star power there with Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs on offense. Von Miller, though, is the third. At his advanced age, should he even be on this list?
I think so, out of respect, and what we saw most recent of him was pretty awesome. Milano, I think, does have a case. Tre'Davious White's also considered with Milano, but White was not the same post-injury either. That's a little concerning for me, too, if I'm the Bills.
Tre'Davious White is a really interesting one because he would absolutely be on this list for me. And that team in the secondary, because I think you could get a big jump from their second-year corner as well.
They need
that they drafted, and then Tre'Davious White, kind of another year removed from his injuries, and maybe they're a heck of a lot better there, and that's where the floor and the ceiling could even be higher for an already good football team in Buffalo.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting too that even though they're up in age, they brought back both of the safeties. That's been one of the best pairings out there, and only had one of them for most of last year. So if that secondary could be a real strength, which you don't have to squint too hard for it to be, that would be really something for them. Yeah.
And Von Miller, too, as long as he doesn't fall off a cliff, they need that pass rush. And he's kind of the only one they got that's that style of player.
Yeah. No, it's pretty obvious who the guys are here.
Absolutely. Carolina Panthers, their rookie quarterback, you would love for them to make this list. Rookies not included here. So J.C. Horn, who we finally saw last year after he missed his rookie season with the torn ACL. Brian Burns, who's absolutely number one on this list for me for the Carolina Panthers on that team now. Yeah. And, he's the face of that franchise going forward, depending on what happens with their young quarterback. And then, interesting, Taylor Moton is the third guy. And this is why I've kind of talked about the Panthers as being like, they're starting a rookie quarterback. Like they might be drafting the top of the draft. They'll probably earn a higher pick than they earned this year before trading up.
And they probably traded one of their top 3 guys. I would imagine DJ Moore would have been on this list over Moton. I really like Derek Brown. I don't think people talk about him enough as a really up-and-coming power defensive tackle. But absolutely, you want Chase Young to be on this list next year. And they have so much cap space. Maybe they have the best receiver in the free agency or whatever, best tight end or whatever, some high-priced guy that's an obvious plug-and-play top three type of player.
I don't think we've talked about it enough, how crazy it could be if next year the Bears end up with the number 1 overall pick again because it comes from the Panthers, but Fields turns into a superstar. Like, how much could they get again from trading out of the number 1 spot in back-to-back years?
Yeah, which leads us to the Bears. They're next.
There we go. Look at that segue.
Look at you.
Professional podcasting here, Matt. The Bears, Justin Fields is on the list of the top 3 players there. So pivotal how his third season goes for not only the Bears, but his entire career and the direction of the Chicago Bears organization. They brought in 2 players, though, that join him now. And it just goes to show how devoid of talent the rest of the Bears roster was, because their 2 biggest additions this offseason are now joining Justin Fields in the top 3, and that is free agent linebacker Tremaine Edmonds and DJ Moore, who they traded for from the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of optimism around Chicago, and you talked about it. I mean, all the assets they have in the future and what Fields can become. And I know you and I are Fields believers, but this is a pretty sad top 3. And 2 of them just showed up, and Fields is really unproven.
Right. Yeah, this kid, a lot of work to be done. Let's put it that way. Yeah. And I'm bullish on him. I'm excited about what that Bears team is going to look like, but they've got to go do it. They've got to go show it still, because it's all theoretical right now.
I mean, if Fields is number 1 on this list next year and Darnell Wright's number 2, I'm like, okay, now we're going. Let's roll,
Yeah, and DJ Moore is still up there, and that's a connection. And I've liked some of the reports I've seen with them, building some chemistry with Fields and DJ Moore. They've hit, they've hit some short passes. They've hit some, tight window throws. They've hit some deep balls in OTAs already. So exciting time for Bears fans for sure.
And then you draft the best edge rusher in the class, and he's a Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett type guy.
That's the thing that needs to be added to that football team. For sure.
Yep, no doubt. And they have the resources to do it. Just going to take a year.
Mm-hmm. Cincinnati Bengals coming up next. Browns, Cowboys, and the rest of the teams in the NFL. Who are the top 3 stars on each roster, and who could replace those stars in the near future next? Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson on the Locked On Network, I always do that, is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Make a fast break right now to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $2,000, $2,500 bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. That's up to $2,500 back if that first bet doesn't win, depending on how much you bet. And there's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sports book. Of course, we've got NBA finals going on, NHL playoffs, but how about some NFL bets that you can make? You can go bet on, for example, the 49ers to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 1. There's weekly odds already up for the 2023 season at FanDuel. 49ers favored by 3 on the road at Pittsburgh, by the way, in week 1, even though we don't know who's even playing quarterback for that football team.
I know, I like that one.
You can bet on rookies of the year, season awards, who will win the next Super Bowl. There is win totals. 8.5 is the win total for the season win total for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Matt, what do you think? Over or under 8.5?
It's one of the easiest bets out there. Over.
Under. Oh, over. Okay. Division winners, conference winners, you name it, you can find it at FanDuel. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up and get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NFL and the NBA. Okay, Matt. We're on to the Cincinnati Bengals here. Top 3, according to PFF, is Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. No love for any of the big men. No love for any defenders on this list. Hard to argue with 1 and 2, but I'm kind of looking at the roster, and I don't know if I'd put anybody over T. Higgins either.
Yeah, and they have some fine defensive players and a really good defense, but this one's about as cut and dry as it comes, and it might be the same for the next 5 years in a row.
DJ Reader's not a sexy player,
really
and
good,
doesn't get you fantasy football points or anything like that. But that dude inside might be the best in the game right now, clogging run lanes as a big defensive tackle.
Yeah, and their defense is night and day with him in and out of the lineup too, which speaks volumes.
Cleveland Browns, Nick Chubb, Joel Bitonio, and Myles Garrett make the top 3. And, with Chubb and Myles Garrett for sure. And Joel Bitonio is kind of an unknown player. He's been around the league for 10 years already and just been rock solid for them at guard for a very long time.
Chubb and Garrett are phenomenal. Deshaun Watson has to be on this list next year, though. Has to be.
No doubt. He has to be. And he can't be on it right now based on what we've seen in recent what was it? Is it 700 days since
700 days off he had, yeah.
He had 700 days off and came back and was not his old self. Is he his old self? Then he's absolutely number one on this list, even ahead of Myles Garrett.
Yep. I mean, that's as pivotal as any player here, but he has to be on this list next year or things have gone really awry.
Dallas Cowboys, Micah Parsons, CD Lamb, and Zach Martin, who's another elder statesman that would have been, if they did this list for 10 years, he'd have been on this list for 10 years.
Yeah, and this is a really good group. I mean, to keep Dak Prescott off is big. They have, guys like Pollard and some of their other offensive linemen. It's a really good roster, and it has star power. It has players at the right positions, wide receiver, edge, quarterback. Can't argue, though. Those would be my three.
I'm putting Dak on over CD Lamb, I think.
Okay.
Or over Martin, but Dak, I think, I know he threw a lot of touchdowns or a lot of interceptions last year, but I mean, Dak's a dude, and he's too important for that football team. And look, CD Lamb, CD Lamb's a really good football player, but I think he has one of the best jobs in the league because the team just force feeds him with targets and puts him in a spot to get the most targets. And some receivers around the league don't have, that luxury where they're the focal point of a passing game and can move around and play out of the slot and get every target thrown their way. And he's a really good player. Don't get me wrong, but I don't want to say overrated, but he's in a really nice situation.
He might be a slightly, not massively better fantasy back of the football card stat guy than he is real life football player.
Denver Broncos, Patrick Surtain II, Randy Gregory, and Justin Simmons. I mean, not a who's who list for the Denver Broncos. Surtain's been awesome just from the moment he stepped into the league, so absolutely deserves to be there. But Randy Gregory is sort of a journeyman edge rusher at this point. Justin Simmons, really good player, and has been for a while. But yeah, you need more star power on the Denver Broncos.
I think Sauce and Surtain are already the two best corners in the league, but it'd be nice to have an offensive guy in the category. You know what I mean? What if this was Jerry Jeudy or something? You know what I mean? Randy Gregory doesn't move the needle a lot for me.
That's so interesting what their passing game is going to look like. If Sean Payton can unlock something and find some of that magic that Russell Wilson showed for so many years in the NFL. And Jerry Jeudy is one of the oddest receivers in the league because the talent you saw out of Alabama for him is there. He's one of the top separators in the league as a wide receiver. And you think to yourself, well, if he gets open as much as the best receivers in the league, which he does, how come he's not a better player? And it's like, that bad at the catch point. He can't catch in traffic. Is it just the offense or the quarterback play has been that bad? So I'm not writing off Jerry Jeudy. This could be a breakout year for him. So Sean Payton, obviously the most pivotal here.
Yeah, and they picked up his fifth-year option, and the light could go on or everything could fall into place, and Judy's what we think he is. Or he might be just one of those guys where, something's missing.
Yeah, he just can't win dirty. He's a 7-on-7 player.
Yeah, you might be right. You might be right. This will be a huge year for him.
Detroit Lions added a lot of talent in the last few years. They have Amon-Ra St. Brown listed here as the top star for the Detroit Lions. Aiden Hutchinson from last year's draft, number 2 pick in the 2022 draft, and then Penei Sewell, who was their top pick in the draft before. So, I mean, you got a second-year guy and 2 third-year guys on the list.
That's what I say. Is what I like the most here is third season, second season, third season. Great. And I think Sewell's going to be a star. I think the other two are really strong as well. Who cares about the position value at this point, but maybe one of those first round picks steps up here and, or Brian.
Any one of those, any one of their top 4 picks. Like, we talked about what teams ended up with in the draft based on what they started with. And I didn't like the value that they got in the draft, but they got 4 good players that any of them could show up on the list, including their 4th selection, which is a second rounder safety, Brian Branch out of Alabama.
Exactly. And I'm glad they mentioned Frank Ragnow wasn't also considered. He's one of the probably 5 best centers in the league.
Yeah. Healthy Frank Ragnow is awesome.
Yeah. Good core.
Yeah. Green Bay Packers, no Aaron Rodgers, Matt. This is a very interesting season for the Green Bay Packers. Transitional year. Jordan Love is not on the list. Could he be next year? I think that's the hope. But it's Jair Alexander, Rashawn Gary, and Aaron Jones, the top 3 stars for the Green Bay Packers in 2023.
I mean, there's tons of teams, the Steelers, Atlanta, Carolina, we talked about, certainly Green Bay, that if their quarterback does get to this level where they're one of the top 3 players on your team, you're doing the jig. You're doing cartwheels. You're thrilled. But a year ago, this would have been Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers, and David Bakhtiari, and now it's
right
defensive dudes that are a little more of a projection,
Yeah. So if next year's list is Jordan Love instead of Aaron Jones and Jair Alexander and Rashawn Gary, the Packers are probably cooking. And we're probably North champs.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And they have a lot of defensive players that could take a step forward, too. There's a lot of first-round picks on that side of the ball.
We have the first rookie that showed up on the list here, which maybe is an indication of the Houston Texans roster. But Laramie Tunsil, last year's rookie running back Dameon Pierce, and Will Anderson. I didn't even think they were including rookies because I hadn't really seen any of them on this list. He makes the list for the Houston Texans here as the top 3 stars. And they have another rookie they drafted before Will Anderson is CJ Stroud.
Since Bijan didn't make the list, I kind of thought that was off limits, but I get it here considering who he's competing with on the Texans roster. There is hope here, but that's not a real strong top 3. I mean, Dameon Pierce is number 2.
I'd probably put Stroud still over Pierce. As good of a rookie season Pierce had. Was Stingley so bad that you wouldn't put him above Pierce because of positional value? Jalen Petrie actually is probably the guy I would put on the list because I loved what I saw from him, not only in college, but as a rookie.
Yeah. And this could look very different next year. They hope it does. Well, maybe
a lot of young talent, new coach. Yeah. It could be a little rocky. And they gave away their first round pick too. So Stroud, Will Anderson, they better be good. They better be on this list next year.
But there easily could be guys fighting with Tunsil, who's a great left tackle. Stingley's a lockdown corner. Anderson's everything he's cracked up to be. There are some dudes here that could make this look a lot different.
Indianapolis Colts list consists of the same guys that were on the list last year. Jonathan Taylor, DeForest Buckner, and Quentin Nelson, and then you've got a guy like Shaquille Leonard that should
out of sight, out of mind.
So when you're looking at just star power, Colts are in pretty good shape.
Yeah, this isn't bad. I think the Colts are being slept on a little bit as having a rebound season and being hard to play against.
It's just so hard because of the quarterback position and the rawest, quote unquote, rawest of those quarterbacks. Is his floor so high as a runner that it's not going to be as difficult to win games as it usually is for a rookie quarterback. So we'll see what that is.
That's what I'm expecting.
Yeah.
Maybe he doesn't develop all the things you want to see in year 1, but that doesn't mean he's not hard to play against in the meantime.
I think it does fall off quite a bit though after those top 4 guys, because some other names considered Michael Pittman, he doesn't deserve to be in a star tier. I don't think.
Right. I mean, Isaiah Rodgers is in consideration for one of your top 3 players. I bet there's people out there who don't know who Isaiah Rodgers is.
Yeah, people are like, "Oh, why you should not be considering
it." Right.
Jacksonville Jaguars. They got a star young quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. They've got Josh Allen, the edge rusher, still playing at a high level, even if he's not collecting as many sacks as maybe Jaguars fans had hoped after he was drafted in the first round in 2019. And then Tyson Campbell, who's had an interesting career there and has become their top cover guy.
Had a really good year. It went under the radar, but you'd love for this to be Lawrence by a mile, Campbell or Trevon Walker and Ridley, something like that. I mean, now you're talking, and it could happen.
Fascinated by what Ridley's going to look like this year in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Kansas City Chiefs. This one's not.
This is the easiest one ever. Wow.
Not hard. Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones. What more needs?
Yeah, that's.
I mean,
that
they've got
equals
a lot
of wins. That equals Super Bowl rings and wins mixed with Andy Reid and throw in some good offensive linemen in the boot. Yep, that's how you do it.
Yeah. Joe Thuney and Creed Humphrey in consideration, but nobody's knocking those 3 guys off the list.
No, they might be the best 3 at their position. 2 of the 3 definitely are, and Jones might be now as well.
Las Vegas Raiders here. They do have Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs on offense, and they got Max Crosby on defense. So that's not a bad place to start.
It's not. Star power is not a huge problem for the Raiders. I mean, these 3 are very, very good at what they do. Maybe what's his face, the first round pick out of Texas Tech. I always forget. Wilson could get in this conversation. That would be lovely. Colton Miller's also thrown in there. Fine. Pretty sure it won't be a quarterback though.
No doubt. And it's not going to be Jimmy G. Jimmy can be a good player and have a
nice he can be a fine player.
He's not going to knock those guys off the list, I'm sure. But it's the rest of that roster. Who's going to step up for them, because they're going to have some secret superstars on their roster to have the season that Raiders fans are probably hoping for.
Yeah, and besides the two edge rushers, I'm having a hard time coming up with defensive players. I mean, I kind of like Mooring, the safety, but there's not a lot of high ceiling guys on that side of the ball.
Do you think Raiders fans are maybe even rooting for Caleb Williams? Are they in a state where it's like, oh gosh, you know what? Let's just tank and go get a top quarterback and stop this?
Yes. I think the short answer is yes.
Because most of the time when we talk bad about a team, we hear it from fans. And I haven't heard that much from the Raiders. As bad if we talked about them much less this offseason than last offseason. So
they tend to agree with us, I think. Yeah.
Maybe you're in that mindset right now.
I got a lot of heat from Raiders fans last year.
Oh, yeah, you did. This year, it's the Lions fans that are coming for you, Matt.
Yeah, bring it on.
Yeah.
Boy, this next team's interesting. They got a lot of good candidates.
Los Angeles Chargers, the real underachievers right now. That's why I think their head coach is on the hot seat. You know, as long as the new offensive coordinator is the ticket there, then they're rolling because they got stars all over the place. Justin Herbert at quarterback, Joey Bosa on defense, Derwin James on defense, Khalil Mack on defense, Rashawn Slater is a stud left tackle, and Austin Eckler is a fantasy superstar and a really undervalued player in the league, I think.
Yeah, I mean, throwing Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. I mean, those guys have had nice careers, especially Allen. And one thing PFF notes here is they got to keep these guys on the field. I mean, Derwin, Bosa, Slater, those guys missed a lot of time.
It's wild when you're like 5'7" running back is your Iron Man on your team.
Right. But that guy might be the 4th pick in fantasy drafts this year. Like, he's really good.
Next, the other team in Los Angeles and the rest of the league, who are the top 3 stars on every team, and who are the up-and-comers that could be on the list next year. Next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel. Shout out to our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up there. And shout out to our everydayers as well. Make sure you're subscribed up to Peacock and Williamson on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Okay, we've got the Los Angeles Rams, Matt, which is only star power, and
this is funny,
even more so than the Raiders. Like there are names that football fans that pay attention to the game would not recognize that are going to be starting week 1 for the Rams on defense.
I mean, the reason it's funny is there's only 3 names to consider, and they're in their 10th season, 7th season. That's Cooper Kupp, and he came in the league very old. 15th season, Stafford. Of course, Donald's number 1. But what's hilarious is also considered none.
Nobody else is considered, and the rest of the guys are in their 30s. So we'll see.
Could none of these guys be on the list next year? Is it like Steve Avila and Tutu Atwell? And like this could be really bad next year.
Skoranek.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting team building that happened with Los Angeles. They got their ring. Let's see what
of
this
course
is.
Never forget that.
Banners fly forever, Matt. Miami Dolphins, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Ramsey, who came from the Los Angeles Rams, and Jalen Phillips is 3rd.
Ooh, I respect that.
Okay.
I mean, that might be a little. Is he better than Armstead or Waddle or some of their other stars? Maybe not.
Definitely put Waddle up there. Probably put Xavier Howard up there.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I slept on the season that Jalen Phillips had last year.
The other name that I can't believe is not mentioned is Christian Wilkins. Christian Wilkins is a foundational player for them.
Yeah,
he should probably be 3rd.
He deserves to be on there.
Yeah.
Good group though.
No, that's a good group, and they're not old.
Minnesota Vikings, Justin Jefferson, Danielle Hunter, and Christian Darrisaw.
Yeah, Darrisaw is getting into that neighborhood of, I think he's already a top 10 left tackle. He could be a top 5 one. Jefferson, I think, is the number 1 receiver. Talked about him yesterday. What worries me is I don't see much on defense, that can make this list, and Hunter could easily fall off this list. Could Lewis Seen be on there? Who knows? I mean, that's really stretching it.
Some people to step up on that side of the ball in the honorable mention category. Kirk Cousins. We know exactly what Kirk Cousins is going to be. Dalvin Cook might not even be there, and he's on this list. So
I don't know if either will be there next year. Probably not.
Probably unlikely that either one's there next year.
Yeah. It's a little scary. It's a little fragile.
Step up season for the Minnesota Vikings for some of those young players.
Yeah.
New England Patriots, they've got Ramondre Stevenson, who, Matt, I know you love in the fantasy universe, Matthew Judon, and Josh Uche is the third player on their list of top 3 players. And I think I think this list, when you look at the honorable mentions too, you got center Dave Andrews, good player, Mac Jones, who they don't like,
That's
and
a
he doesn't
stretch.
like them, and then
Right.
Kyle Duggar, who's
Yeah.
not really gotten his career off the ground. I mean,
It's an odd team build. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a lot of quality dudes. It's a lot of throwing. Yeah, it's a lot of quantity instead of quality. It'd be nice if they had a receiver on this list or some sort of pass catcher. And I don't know any that can develop into that type of player. Maybe a Christian Barmore could step up. And they have a lot of pieces on defense, but none of them are, superstars.
The Bizarro Rams.
Bizarro Rams. Yeah.
They have all depth, no stars.
Yeah.
Rams have 3 stars and 0 depth.
0 depth. Also considered, could have went on and on probably here.
New Orleans Saints, Cam Jordan in his 13th season, Demario Davis in his 12th season, and Ryan Ramczyk in his 7th season are the top.
You don't like that part. I mean, the age. You definitely don't like that part.
I mean, and then the other guys you consider is Derek Carr, who's in his 9th year, 10th year now.
These guys are all getting up there too.
Tyrann Mathieu, not young.
Yeah, and I loved Brian Brzee coming out of school, but is he going to be that type of player as an end of first round pick? Probably not. I mean, where's the next group coming from? The next generation.
Right. So Saints hanging on to something, or does it start to crumble this year?
I always think it's about to crumble, but they keep it together.
Yeah, done a good job of that. New York Giants, Dexter Lawrence on the interior of that defensive line, Andrew Thomas, left tackle, and Saquon Barkley, running back, are the top 3.
I'm fond of that. I'll be very honest. I mean, I think Dexter Lawrence is a stud defensive tackle. Thomas is, if I could take any offensive lineman to build around, considering age, he'd be in the equation. Barkley's really good. I mean, I don't care if he's a running back or not. I would like seeing Kayvon Thibodeau's name thrown in there, though, too, at least as an also considered.
Yeah. Leonard Williams considered. I think Kayvon Thibodeau would have to surpass him as well. For Kayvon Thibodeau in year 2 to prove that he's that top 5 edge rusher, which you expect special things from with those kind of talents in the NFL. And it's pretty telling that not even in consideration is their $40 million per year quarterback.
Right. And I know he's up in age, but maybe Darren Waller can rebound and be on this list next year.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt.
Yeah. That would be
New York Jets.
Good for them. Yeah.
New York Jets, you talked about Sauce Gardner being maybe the best cornerback in the NFL right now. It's either him or Surtain. I think those would be the top 2. I think you nailed it. Quinnen Williams is in for a big payday very soon. And Aaron Rodgers, the brand newest New York Jet, is already immediately in their top 3.
Sure. I mean, Williams is right there with, Lawrence that we just talked about is stud, in their prime defensive tackles. We don't have to talk about Rodgers. But, I mean, Sauce, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall. I mean, that rookie class could really pay off for years.
Yeah, and adding Aaron Rodgers knocks the offensive rookie of the year, Garrett Wilson, off the list probably.
Yeah, and boy, I would gladly build a team around Garrett Wilson.
A lot of talent there in New York. That's why I'm so excited about seeing what it looks like with Aaron Rodgers. Obviously.
There's some stars.
A lot of stars in Philly as well. Philadelphia Eagles, Jalen Hurts, Lane Johnson, and A.J. Brown are the top 3, and a lot of other players to consider.
It's hard to narrow it down, but that's as good as any. I mean, Brown's probably a top 5-ish receiver. Lane Johnson's a Hall of Fame right tackle, in my opinion. Kelsey's also on that offensive line. Yeah, I mean, what do you say? I think it's the best roster in the league.
The rare right tackle only that's one of the best in the league.
Yeah.
I'm racking my brain right now, just seeing his name made me think of that. I can't think of another guy that was like, oh, this guy was only a right tackle, but he was a Hall of Famer.
Hall of Famer, right. It's pretty rare. There aren't many right tackles in the Hall of Fame.
Pittsburgh Steelers, TJ Watt, speaking of Hall of Fame path, Cam Hayward, and Minka Fitzpatrick.
That's an easy top 3. I mean, the offense was the youngest in the league by leaps and bounds, and they added guys like Isaac Silomolo, so they're getting a little older, but it's pretty obvious who the best 3 Pittsburgh Steelers are. Hey, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that Pickett makes it. Yeah, he shouldn't even be considered. He's on also considered, but if he could get even to the point where he's considered a year from now, they'll be doing just fine.
Legitimately considered, right?
Yeah.
And if he's on that, if it's Watt, Fitzpatrick, and Kenny Pickett,
you're doing just fine. Yeah.
Right. San Francisco 49ers have plenty of star power. And this is actually one of those where it's difficult to, who
McCaffrey and Kittle don't make the list.
Yeah. You know who the stars are, which 3 do you pick? It's a tough one. So Trent Williams, best at his position in the league. Nick Bosa is just defensive player of the year. So you got to include him.
Pretty good. Yeah.
And then it's like, who do you pick? Warner, McCaffrey, or George Kittle next? And it's Fred Warner that makes the list here.
I think they would have been my three, but I'm laughing to no end that Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle can't make the list. I mean, that says a lot.
Mention Debo Samuel,
Debo and Ayuk, right?
Yeah, a lot of talent on that football team. They just brought in Javon Hargrave, and he's not even.
He's pretty good too. Yeah.
Seattle Seahawks, DK Metcalf, Geno Smith, and second-year corner Tariq Woolen. By the way, I just saw a clip of Tariq Woolen because he was a former wide receiver before he converted in college to play corner. And it's odd that a 6'4" wide receiver would be converted to corner. Usually it's, someone of a different build. But one of his reps I saw from high school of him playing wide receiver was ridiculous with how much ground he was covering as a runner. He made a catch near the sideline and then he just took off. And he was eating up 10 yards per stride and just blew by everybody. Like, I can't imagine what that speed looks like against high school kids, right? It was unbelievable. But converted the defensive side of the ball, and Pete Carroll can coach himself up some DBs, and he did with Tariq Woolen out of the 5th round last year.
This is odd because I'm just to throw a curveball at you. I interviewed Patrick Peterson last week, and it came up. I mean, he's a 5-star recruit, as you would imagine, way back when. And someone asked him, "Well, why didn't you stick with receiver?" He's like, "I wanted to play corner because I didn't want someone else to dictate when I got the football, and he didn't want to be reliant on a quarterback." I just found that interesting. Like, he really gave it a lot of thought. Like, I'd rather be a corner and do my job and shut this guy down, not I do my job, get wide open, and the guy doesn't throw me the football. I couldn't live that way.
That's interesting. Yeah, to work so hard and maybe you get 6 targets in a game. Yeah.
I mean, like, I never thought of that. And it was really a mature thing for a 14-year-old to come up with back in the day. Right. This isn't bad for Seattle, but I kind of would wish it was Cross, the left tackle, who could easily get there. Mm-hmm. Or, maybe one of the rookies from this year. What if it's Smith Njigba or the corner they drafted really early, who's I can't remember his name, from Illinois.
Devin Witherspoon.
Yeah. So there's candidates,
Walker from last year's 2nd round. He had a really nice rookie season, consideration for rookie of the year. Tyler Lockett as well. Here's a good question for you. Do you think, let's say their rookie classes from the last 2 years, Cross, Njigba, Witherspoon, do you think it's more likely that they're on the list or that Jamal Adams is on the list?
Those guys, the youngsters. That's what I was about to say. It's funny you beat me to it. I was going to say it wouldn't shock me if next year's list is 5th-year experience, 2nd-year experience, 2nd-year experience. You know what I mean? Like, or 3rd year, second. Yeah. That's appealing.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers, no Tom Brady in town, but Tristan Wirfs is still there. Levante David and Mike Evans are the top 3.
See, this makes the Bucs look good because they have good players. You're leaving Vita Vea off. You're leaving Chris Godwin off. But there's a lot of age, and the tier after the dudes mentioned is what scares me, not to mention none of them are quarterbacks.
In quarterback, what's quarterback play going to be like for him this year?
Yeah, they have some holes on the roster.
Tennessee Titans, Jeffrey Simmons, Derrick Henry, and Kevin Byard.
That's really good. Will Henry be there after this year or through the course of the year? Byard's already talked about not being happy. It'd be nice if Treylon Burks is on here next year.
They considered Harold Landry, who's been a nice player. He had some injuries.
That's not great if he's your 4th, though.
Yeah, you got young quarterbacks there behind Tannehill, who's probably not the long-term answer for you necessarily. So, kind of just a weird team, weird roster.
They are. Like, they need Skoronski to be on here next year.
Right, yeah.
That's an easy one, yeah.
And they're well coached. Like, I don't think they're Treylon Burks would be huge.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
There would mean the passing game was doing something. But it's a tough team because they're not – I think they're too good and too well coached to completely be –
junk.
Yeah. Although, I mean, they weren't great last year. They were picked 11th in the draft. So they might be around that spot again this year.
They're devoid of talent, though, and this exercise shows that. If Harold Landry right now is your 4th best player.
Last team, Washington Commanders. They've drafted a million first-round defensive linemen, and 2 of them are on the list here, Jonathan Allen and Montez Sweat, and then wide receiver Terry McLaurin is your top star there for the Washington Commanders.
And Chase Young's been disappointing and didn't pick up his 5th-year option, but him and Daron Payne, who they gave massive deals to, could certainly be in this equation. I mean, your 4 stud defensive linemen could live up to that. I'm a big McLaurin fan. I like Dotson a lot too, but again, there's not going to be a quarterback on this list. I'm pretty certain of that a year from now.
And after, I mean, last year, I think I might even take Payne over Montez Sweat too.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, they're fine up front, no doubt.
There it is. There's the top 3 stars and maybe some future stars for every single team in the NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen every day. Back next time, right here, Peacock and Williamson.